We can say this is probably the best story of the month of June 2021. Here's how it begins. A couple days ago, Sandy Cortez of Westchester complained online that her grandmother in Puerto Rico lives in poverty because of Big Orange. She put up a picture of her grandmother's house. This is her home, she wrote. Trump blocked relief money for Puerto Rico. Well, Matt Walsh, who's often on this show, felt a twinge of empathy. So he set up a fundraiser, a GoFundMe for Sandy Cortez's grandmother, but neither one of them wanted the money. Matt Walsh is the compassionate host of The Matt Walsh Show and joins us tonight with an update to this poignant tale of aid refused. Matt Walsh, first of all, thank you for doing what Sandy Cortez herself didn't do, which is try to help her Abuela, her grandmother. What happened here?
Yeah, and thank you for giving me a chance to talk about my philanthropy, which has been a big passion of mine since last week. But listen, she claimed that her mother's been living or her grandmother rather has been living in this dilapidated shack, I guess, for 4 years since the hurricane. And she's a wealthy single woman who has 2 apartments and a Tesla that she just recently bought, apparently. She, for whatever reason, refused to help her own grandmother. And so we said, all right, you know what, we'll get together and we'll raise the money. We raised $100,000 in 10 hours. Okay, we probably could have raised $1 million if they had let the fundraiser continue. But someone, big scare quotes around it, in Abuela's family shut down the fundraiser about 10 hours into it and said that she doesn't want the money. Now, this raises a lot of questions, like, for example, does this mean that Abuela really wasn't in the dire straits as it was presented to us? Or would AOC prefer for her grandmother to live in that state, suffering, rather than to take money from us? I think either way, it's sort of scandalous, I think, on AOC's part.
Well, it's a little bit weird that it was left to you to help Ocasio-Cortez's grandmother. I mean, I think of you as a kind of, I don't know, caped crusader for good, a white knight in this world. But I mean, shouldn't AOC be a little ashamed of this?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously, look, I've already put I've put my hat in the ring. If anyone wants to nominate me for a Nobel Peace Prize, I will accept it. It doesn't mean anything anyway, so you might as well give it to me. But it is interesting that she would leave her grandmother like that. And you know, the thing is, she said, well, I'm focused on the systemic problems, and the government was supposed to solve this problem. Well, it does show that actually you don't have to wait around for the system to solve every problem. Sometimes free individuals can just get together, but this is a problem we could have solved, not just for Abuela, but they could have taken the money, fixed the ceiling, bought her some furniture she clearly needs, and then they could have taken the rest of the money and helped the neighbors. They could have helped the whole community with these funds, but they preferred not to do that. I'm
starting to think maybe helping people isn't the point for Ocasio-Cortez. I'm so glad you were able to talk about your philanthropy, your passion for helping. Matt Walsh, the great Matt Walsh, thank you.
Thank you.
See, that's a good story. We didn't oversell it. Joe Biden may have lost a step along the way, but his handlers work fast. Within hours of the inauguration in January, Biden's White House opened America's borders to the world, not simply to job seekers and gang members from Mexico and Central America, but to varieties of illegal migrants from all over the globe, from Africa and Asia, from the Middle East. Virtually anyone who could get to Mexico was and is admitted into the United States without a visa. In some cases, foreign nationals whose identities we cannot verify were flown to the interior of our country and permanently resettled without the permission of the people who already live there, Americans. How did migrants get from Congo to Lewiston, Maine? And why? Well, because Susan Rice and ideologues like her very much want to change Maine's demographics, as well as the population mix in every other state in the union. So the administration is working to do that by fiat, without a vote in Congress, without public consent of any kind. By definition, this is the most radical possible attack on the core premise of democracy, which is that citizens get to run their own countries, not foreigners, citizens. The leaders of the Democratic Party, though, no longer believe in democracy as constituted, and they definitely don't plan to lose another election. So as the rest of us go about our lives, they're importing huge numbers of new voters into the United States. When you say this out loud, they become absolutely hysterical and call you names. But they do that only because it's so obviously true. Unfortunately for Susan Rice, this is one change to the country that's pretty hard to hide. If you live within 100 miles of the Mexican border, for example, you watch it happen in real time. On the border, the rule of law has been suspended. The American system of order and decency and fairness is being mocked and destroyed by the very people in charge of sustaining it. You don't have to be a conservative Republican to be deeply offended by what's going on. Last November in Texas, many thousands of lifelong Democrats with Mexican last names voted for Donald Trump. Why? Because they knew perfectly well what the left planned to do to the border. And they were right. They're patriotic Americans. They didn't want to see their country destroyed. So for the Joe Biden administration, this is potentially a very serious political problem. Most people, no matter what color they are, no matter who they vote for, think that Joe Biden's current immigration policy is lunacy, because it is. Opening the border is the single most unpopular thing the White House has done so far, by far. Biden's handlers understand this could be a disaster for them. So this weekend, they dispatched Kamala Harris to Central America with orders to pretend she's trying to fix it. Harris, you may remember, is the shallow political opportunist from Canada. We're often told as some kind of civil rights hero / moral leader. On Sunday, Harris flew to Guatemala to unveil her policy to address the crisis. What is it? In a word, the plan is bribery. The administration plans to spend billions of dollars to pay Latin America's poor not to move to the United States. CNN, of course, loves the idea. It blames America. Quote, Kamala Harris's visit to Central America signals a new chapter, the channel slobbered in a headline this morning. But there's nothing actually new about this. We've seen this cartoon before. 6 years ago, as Barack Obama's vice president, Joe Biden announced what he called a plan for Central America in the New York Times. The idea at the time is the idea now. Once we send billions to corrupt foreign governments, their citizens will stop showing up in Texas and California. So we've tried it. How did it work exactly? Well, let's see. We now have more people from Central America coming over our border illegal than at any time in decades, possibly ever. So it didn't work very well. That's obvious to everyone but Joe Biden, who doesn't seem to have noticed. In April, he told Congress that his plan was a brilliant success.
When I was vice president, the president asked me to focus on providing help needed to address the root causes of migration. And it helped keep people in their own countries instead of being forced to leave. The plan was working, but the last administration decided it was not worth it. I'm restoring the program and asked Vice President Harris to lead our diplomatic effort to take care of this. I have absolute confidence she'll get the job done.
So the last administration was weak on border security, right? Okay, got it. But the sentence to pay attention to is the claim that people from Central America are, quote, forced to come here. Who are they forced to come here by? Well, by us, of course. We're not keeping up with our bribes to the drug traffickers who run, say, Honduras, so it's our fault. Better restart the payments immediately or someone could get hurt. But that's a lie. Foreign aid almost never accomplishes what we pretend it will accomplish for the people for whom it's intended. And if you think otherwise, how about explaining Africa? For more than 50 years, the West, the U.S. in particular, has bombarded that continent with taxpayer and NGO money, as well as with all the stupid and very patronizing assumptions that accompany that money. And the result? Is there a single African country that is better off for it, less corrupt and more self-sufficient? Take an hour or two to check that fact sometime, if you have the time. It's hard to find a single country. Foreign aid projects are where liberal arrogance goes to die. They almost never work for the people they're supposed to work for. Sorry, they don't. It sounds like they would, but they don't. Yesterday, even the New York Times conceded that this is true. For example, over the past 10 years, Guatemala alone has received more than $1.5 billion in U.S. aid. So what's the result of that aid? Small country, $1.5 billion. Well, according to the New York Times, poverty and malnutrition in Guatemala have now risen to unprecedented levels. Really? Why are you surprised? When was the last time that welfare made someone stronger or happier? The same is true with countries. If anything, Joe Biden's aid package encouraged illegal migration to the United States. Michael Clemens, a fellow at the Center for Global Development, studied the data on this. He found that, quote, foreign aid focused on economic development is actually associated with increases in emigration from poor countries. But of course that's true. The only surprise is that we would be surprised. Healthy places are by definition self-sufficient places. Dependence, by contrast, breeds misery. That's always true. Misery causes people to flee, and they have. Kamala Harris is no genius, obviously, but even she must sense this. She knows more bribes won't work. So instead of defending her plan on the specifics, she's taking the much easier and far more familiar road more babbling about racism and sexism and, of course, climate change.
There are also long-standing issues that are often called the root causes of immigration. We are looking at the issue of poverty and the lack, therefore, of economic opportunities, the issue of extreme weather conditions and the lack of climate adaptation, as well as corruption and the lack of good governance.
Often called the root causes of immigration. Really, by whom? Exactly. No honest person. Quick, Kamala Harris, name 3 global problems of any kind that are not caused by racism and sexism and climate change, and whose solutions don't make you more powerful. Because that's always the acid test of good faith. Does the solution cost you, or does it help you? If it helps you every single time, maybe it's not really a solution. So what's the answer? Just kidding. Trick question. Obviously, there aren't any global problems that aren't associated with racism and sexism and global climate change, and that don't require Kamala Harris to become a lot more powerful. The funny thing is, and it is funny, no one has told Central Americans this. They think they're coming here to Brownsville and San Ysidro precisely because Kamala Harris is now the vice president. Watch.
Yamate says increased border crossings have been caused in part by the change of administrations in Washington.
The
message changed too. We're going to reunite families, and we're going to reunite children. The very next day, the Coyotes were here organizing groups of children to take them to the United States. We asked the United States government to send more of a clear message to prevent more people from leaving.
Oh, so they're not coming here because of sexism. In fact, in Latin America, they kind of like the patriarchy. Sorry, Kamala Harris. They're not coming here because they're fleeing a culture they don't like. It's their culture. They're coming here because this is a much richer and much more generous country, and now they can come here. So why wouldn't they? It's not their fault. It's ours. And if you really wanted to solve the problem, the answer is pretty simple. You would deport people here illegally. That's what normal countries do. How much time does Mexico or Israel spend blaming itself for people who break their laws? Not a lot of time, actually. Not 1 second. They swiftly deport people who do that. And if we did that, it would get the world's attention immediately. Because the truth is, many of these countries need illegal immigrants in our country in order to continue. That's how unhealthy the economics of this arrangement are. As of 2019, for example, remittances from immigrants to the United States accounted for fully 20% of El Salvador's entire GDP. Is that healthy? Should we continue that? Don't we want an independent El Salvador that can feed itself? Clearly, we don't care. The same was true essentially in Honduras and Guatemala. According to a recent piece that moved on the AP wire, quote, so many Guatemalans have left that much of the country survives on remittances they send home. Once again, if you cared about Guatemala, you would try to make Guatemala independent. You wouldn't make it yet another third world country dependent on NGO and foreign aid money. That's a horrible thing to do. It's the same story in Mexico, by the way. In 2018, then presidential candidate AMLO admitted, quote, these remittances are the main income that this country has, more than oil, more than tourism. Is that what we want for Mexico? If you cared about Mexico, would you want that? No, it's degrading, and it might be part of the reason Mexico is a disaster in the middle of a drug war ongoing for 10 years. Kamala Harris doesn't care. So her solution is the same solution. Give more money to the narco states, to Honduras, where the president is under a DEA investigation for drug trafficking.
We are launching our call to action for businesses to invest in the Northern Triangle. I believe that the businesses, in particular our private business sector, have a very significant role to play, as we all know, in creating jobs, in promoting economic opportunity, and in long-term development. I am proud that we have companies already in the United States who have committed to act. We have MasterCard, who intends to partner across sectors to bring 5 million people in the region into the digital economy and to support 1 million small businesses.
This is hilarious. Only because no one on the left talks about economics or understands economics, all debates used to be about economics. It's not even mentioned anymore. It's all race and gender. But underlying all of this is economics. And what Kamala Harris is saying is that big U.S. companies are, quote, ready to act selflessly, of course, to get more cheap labor in the third world. They're ready to act, even as our own labor market does things that no healthy market would do. Unemployment is going up, even as businesses can't find labor to fill open jobs. Something very ominous is happening in our labor markets. It's being ignored so we can help Honduras's labor market on behalf of El Salvador. And by the way, send more money to governments that don't deserve it, that are corrupt, that don't serve their own people, in the hope they'll stop invading us, but they'll invade us anyway because it's been going on for 10 years.